wouldn't it be great to have students working on real problems with real companies? And that's what at Wharton Customer Analytics we've been trying to do. So if words like datathons, which is just like hackathons with data, analytics accelerators excite you, you're in for a treat. So in this session, what you will see are two engagements that we've been involved with, two in the morning, and we'll talk about two in the afternoon as well. So we'll first kick off with the first engagement. That's Victor Cho, who is a Wharton alum, and he's the CEO of Evite, the company that we use for sending greeting cards. So Evite has been a wonderful corporate partner for us in terms of, again, kind of understanding our mission and being passionate about that mission. So when Victor and we started chatting, and he was very, very passionate about how can we best educate students to think about real-world problems using real data to make actionable decisions. So we had a datathon where many, many people came together. There were about 25 odd teams of students spread all across campus. Again, thinking about analytics being a melting pot. There were students from biophysics. So Levani, who I'll introduce shortly, is a PhD student in biophysics. There were people in computer science. There were people in the Wharton School. There were MBAs, undergrads, variety of different teams trying to come together to try and address the big managerial problems that Victor had put to them. Okay? The team that won, which Levani is going to talk a little bit about what they did, was comprised of, again, a wide variety of different backgrounds coming together. So again, as you saw what Charles was saying, again, I think when you think about analytics in the future, it probably would be a bunch of different people having different skill sets coming together to solve one problem. Okay? So in this case, it's such a pleasure to have Victor back here. Victor, again, as I said, Evite has been a wonderful corporate partner, and we'll continue to have our engagements. Victor is a Wharton alum. And I was asking him, is there anything quirky that I should say about introducing? He said, don't say anything in public. I don't want to say anything. Like, that's fine. But we've had many good conversations. And you're in for a treat in terms of what Victor is going to talk about in the datathon. And Levani, who is a PhD student in biophysics, he's going to follow up and talk about how their team, which was a winning team of this datathon, what did they do? How did they make that happen? Thank you, Victor. Thank you for coming over. Thank you, Levani, as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Guys. All right, we have 15 minutes to walk you through our 15 minutes, 17 minutes, yes. Something around there. Oop, I'm looking for this. To walk you through what we did. But first, I would like to give you a little bit of context on Evite. For those of you that are not social. Is there anybody? Or living alone. I'm sorry. So we're going to do three things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Evite. We're going to walk through the datathon findings and have some Q&A. Super, super simple. So first, show of hands. Has anyone not gotten an Evite? Does anyone not know what Evite is? Don't be shy. Then I'll send you one. OK, good. Awesome. So Evite is, we're the world's largest online invitation service. But we are broader than that. Our mission is to bring people together face-to-face for human connection. So I'm a walking contradiction because I am a huge tech person. All my friends know that. I always buy the latest tech. I'm like super into VR. And then at the same time, I have two young girls, and I think technology is turning evil. It really is. There's some horrendous downsides of phone addiction and the social networks, et cetera. So Evite is this great technology, anti-technology play. Like, if I do my job right, we get a bigger and bigger footprint, and people spend more and more time together with each other, which is great. We're big, so we've done, actually, this slide's a little old. We'll probably cross 3 billion invitations sent fairly soon, maybe in the next year. 100 million users, so we reach roughly a quarter to a third of the US population. Will get an invitation to a party, which is great. A bunch of registered users. One of the coolest things, we have raised now $13 million via Evite through embedded donations. So if any of you ever do throw a party, you can, with a single click, add a widget that allows you to raise money from your guests for any nonprofit in the country or your own personal cause. And we take zero cut of that. It's something that we do purely for social good. So that's Evite in a nutshell. I'm going to walk through how Evite works so you get a sense of the challenge that the students got when they got this datathon challenge. So you're a host. You'll see this term. A host is someone who decides to throw a party. So let's make up a party. Say it's my birthday and I want to throw an event. I'm the host. I spawn off potentially multiple events. right? So my birthday, anniversary, bachelor party, whatever those are. And that generates, or that goes to guests, right? So guests will receive an invitation, hey, come to my party. Some of those guests will turn into hosts. Right? That is actually the core of our viral engine as a business. We actually spend very little money in marketing for a business that reaches that many people, under $2 million in marketing. The entire marketing engine is this. It's called the guest-to-host engine or the host-to-guest engine. Right? You throw a party, people have a good time, hopefully you threw a good party. They use Evite, they had a good experience, and they come back. So that will lead them, right, to send to their own guests. And we have two product offerings that you'll see in this datathon challenge. We have a free offering and we have a premium offering. Our premium offering is an ad-free version of the product. The free offering basically has advertising. Super simple. A very small percentage, sub 5% of our user base will go for the premium offering. So that is how the engine works. These numbers are actually not real numbers, but they're kind of proportionally correct. So the challenge that we gave to the student teams were, hey, we get more value from an event that's thrown via premium, because people actually pay, surprisingly, quite a bit of money just to take off ads for an event. Sometimes $40 or $50, it still surprises me. It's a great place where data works. My intuition was like, no one's going to spend $50 to take off ads for an event, and a whole bunch of people do that, which is pretty interesting. But 10-to-1 ratio of free versus premium. So you guys can picture that complexity in your head, right? Millions of people, 6 million events being thrown, 200 million invitations going out, 25,000 invitations an hour, all this crazy virality in terms of conversions back into hosts, et cetera. So that's our business at a high level. And yeah, I was super excited to work with Wharton to basically do this datathon and tap into the students. The challenge was to develop an ML data science approach to benefit Evite. It was incredibly broad. We didn't want to put super big bounding boxes on it. We effectively unveiled a subset of our data and gave it to the students. We gave it to them in raw form, to their chagrin, I think, because it ended up being quite a bit. And Levani will talk about the work they had to do to actually work to cleanse it and make it usable. And before we go into kind of the winners and the results, I'd say just two things in terms of, if you ask me why did we do this? Why did we actually open up our data set and give it to a bunch of students to play? I'll give you the positive answer and the selfish answer. So the positive answer is exactly what Raghu mentioned, which is, I come from Wharton. Having real-world data and building skill sets in the younger generation, I think, is super critical. It's probably the single biggest gap that I see in employees coming through the business at the meta level is they cannot synthesize complex data and turn it into results and insights. They just get bogged down in the complexity. So I think what Wharton is doing is absolutely amazing. So helping feed that engine, helping give students opportunities to focus on real data was number one. And then, of course, there was a pure selfish reason, which is, hey, something interesting might actually come out of this for Evite. It wasn't the primary motivation for us, but the reality is we actually got, not only from the winning team, something really interesting, we actually got interesting results from all of the other teams. So there's a short list of 4 or 5 takeaways that my team came away with to say, oh, wow, this is really an interesting approach, or this is a methodology we haven't applied. So it was a success on both fronts. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Levani. I can't pronounce his last name, so I'll call him Levani Z, which is kind of like it's like a stage name. But he will walk you through what they did and what they found.
Yes, hello, everyone. So let me talk to you about what me and my team did for this competition. Now, as Victor just said, the problem given to us was a very broad problem. OK, here's the data, and come up with something that will benefit the company. Now, on one hand, this gives you lots of flexibility, but on the other hand, what do you do with it? So first thing, I'm pretty sure all of you know, is that before writing even a single line of code, you need to think of what you will do. And we wanted to come up with potential questions that we could address for this competition. And we came up with three different potential questions we could work on. First one would be to identify the users who are currently already hosts at Evite who might purchase the premium accounts. And then we could maybe target such people to increase the probability of them purchasing premium accounts. The second one was to identify the guests who might become hosts, and again, use the same approach on them. And then there was a third question, where instead of focusing on individual guests, we would focus on the events where the guests might turn into hosts. Now, the second and third question might seem very similar, but from a very technical perspective, they were drastically different. And let me tell you why. When we took a very quick look at the data to address all of these three questions, we realized that there was a very, very strong class imbalance in all of these questions. And anyone who has done any machine learning project knows that this can be a very major challenge when you're working on such project. We realized that by rephrasing the question this way and focusing on events instead of focusing on individual guests, we could drastically, like more than 100 times, improve our class imbalance. And since we didn't have all the time in the world and we were quite limited in resources and in the time, we decided to focus on this question. Now, let me talk about the...
Just on that, I want to mention what I love is that that's never a question that we had asked in the business. We had always thought linearly in terms of, oh, of course, right, the host convert to the guest. So just the simple fact that the students came up with, like, have you thought about the events and whether like an event has a higher propensity to convert? Like whether or not it even worked. I was like, wow, that's really, really interesting. So.
Thank you. And then let me talk about the data first. Again, before jumping into writing fancy machine learning models and solving some crazy problems, let's look at what we're working with. So we're given two sets of files, two tables. Let's put it a simple way. The events table and guest table. The events table, as the title implies, contained information about events. So each row corresponding to an individual event. There was an event ID and then some other features like when the event took place, when it was planned, who was the host, and all the hosts were identified with just a number, then what was the zip code where it was held, and some other information like that. I'm not going to go through all of those details, but you get the idea. Then you get the guest table, and there is some overlap between these tables as it should be, but the primary thing about the guest table, again, as the name implies, was that it provided information regarding each guest, registered guest who attended or at least RSVP'd to this event. So each row contained user ID and event ID for each of the event, each person, including the host. And there's some other information, including, most importantly, what the person RSVP'd and when they RSVP'd and things like that. Now, again, this is an extremely simple schematics, but I guess it's important to realize that any serious problem can be broken down into simple problems, right? So any data science project consists of these primary steps. There's data cleaning, feature engineering, and finally the model training. So we followed exactly the same way, and let me talk briefly about each of these stages of our project. So for the data cleaning project, initially you would expect that, it's a computer-generated data. Probably there won't really be any problems with the data, so you can just skip through that. But we very quickly found that that was not the case. Somehow users still manage to mess up some things, and makes you wonder how. For example, the first problem was with the date. They were like ridiculous dates, like year 8018 probably should be 2018. And then there was year 2050, like I try to plan things in advance, but I do not believe that there was anyone who planned an event that far advanced. So, like some things you could fix, some things you just had to take out. And we just used, just our logical approach to deal with different situations. There was a problem with zip code, and problem here was different. There was nothing technically wrong with the data, but there were challenges from the machine learning perspective because you have different formats. You had American zip codes with 5 digits, 9 digits, which you had Canadian zip codes, you had missing values. So here, just to simplify our problem, we focused on the American zip codes, only limited to the first 5 digits. There were some features which simply were useless in the sense that they contain just a single value. So anyone who has done a machine learning project knows that it's useless and just takes up the resource, so we just got rid of those. Then for the feature engineering, initially we used the provided information. So from these dates, we found out, okay, how early does the person plan the event? How many days in advance before actually the event takes place? How soon did they send out the invitation? So you will see that these things actually are extremely important to identify the people who become hosts. Then there was also the how many people are RSVP yes out of total, but then we also tried to use some external information. Specifically, we used zip codes to get such information as the median household income, population density in the areas where the event took place. then this was probably my most favorite part of the project, to actually identify the training feature. Because the way we rephrased the question, there was no provided feature that we could train our model on, so we had to actually engineer such feature, which the logic is actually quite straightforward. Here we used both events and guests table, and from the events table, we identified for each host the very first event they hosted. Then from the guests table, which also includes the information on the hosts, we identified the very first event that any person has attended, either as a guest or as a host. And then by comparing these two information, if a person has attended the event earlier as a guest before becoming a host, it means they converted from being a guest into a host. And simply by merging these two tables, you can easily identify such events and when they took place and such users. Then you take this information, merge back into the events table, and then you get your training feature. Lastly, this step is probably most straightforward. You have all the data, and you just need to take the model and train your machine learning model. So we used light GBM with binary classification. And you can see here that when we train the model, the most important features were first the zip code, but then the important features were our engineered features, such as median income, the ratio of people who are SVP'd, and then how early a person sends out the invitation before the event takes place. And then to implement our final solution, we came up with the following approach. So it depends, of course, it goes down to probabilities, but you can estimate the potential revenue you can generate if a person becomes a host. So if the predicted revenue by this new host is higher than by directly advertising third-party ads to these guests, then such people too should be targeted by Evite's own advertisement to increase the probability of them actually becoming hosts. And these ads can be designed, again, based on Evite's own data, which is like similar events held in the area where this person lives or attended the event. Some seasonal factors. And it was actually very interesting to play with data because you could see that in summer you have so many barbecue events, but in winter they kind of disappear, except of Texas. There's still, in Austin, there were so many barbecue events, even in summer. Well, I wonder why. I mean winter, I wonder why. So yeah, it was a very interesting, and now, before I go back to Victor and he gives some final remarks, I would like to first acknowledge the team I worked with, because it was definitely, as you understand, not a just one-person job. It was like team effort, and I would like to acknowledge Will Hu, Rachel Krieger, Leon Kim, and Mike Tao, without whom I really would not be able to do this task. And also I would like to first thank Victor and then WCAI for providing this opportunity, because such events, such competitions are very important for young data scientists like myself who are just starting their career. And specifically in my personal case, participating in this event really helped me in my job search just in past couple of months and actually getting in a job. So thank you.
Yeah, I just had 3 quick closing thoughts. One was I was just so blown away by the students that participated. And when I went to Wharton back in 1993, I was proud that I was like the high scorer in my house on 3D Tetris. That was like my big accomplishment. And literally, you sit down with these folks, and it's like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm getting my PhD. It's like, oh, what did you do in the summer? It's like, oh, literally, I worked at CERN on particle. I'm like, really? Like, that's amazing. So that just, I feel lucky that I'm as old as I am now, because I think I would get destroyed by this cohort of people coming out. So that was number 1. And number 2, yeah, I would just make a plug for any of you guys that are new to WCAI or are thinking about doing a kind of partnership. It really was an awesome, it's an awesome partnership, and we get so much out of it. We're too small as a business to have a big, deep, data science bench. We're 120 folks, and we have a 6-person data team, but you have 2 people building the databases, a bunch of analysts. We actually don't have a data scientist on staff, so I am constantly looking for creative ways to supplement resources, because there's no way that we can compete with the Facebooks of the world, right, or the Amazons of the world, more Facebook for us, who do have this massive army of in-house talent. These kind of connections are super valuable. So I think that's just 2 things. I guess have a great time. Number 3. And Lavani, thank you for all the great work. That's it.
You guys will have some questions. All right. So thank you, Victor. Thank you, Levani. So a couple of questions have come in, but I want to first start off, Victor, from your perspective. Yeah. I think, as you mentioned, you were very excited by some of the work that Levani and his team did. From your perspective at Evite, some of the things that we've talked about from yourself and with other people is this distinction between data engineering and data science. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of time, as Levani mentioned, goes away in quote unquote cleaning up the data. That's important. But of course, the next step is how do you kind of get insights from the data? Any thoughts as when people, companies are hiring data engineers, data scientists, how do you think about it? That'd be great to get your perspective.
Yeah, no, so a couple of thoughts. One is there's a macro supply-demand imbalance around hardcore data scientists that probably will be as extreme or maybe more extreme than the mobile development supply-demand imbalance that we had over the last 10 years. For any of you guys that have had to hire mobile developers it's actually gotten way better in the last couple of years, but between 2008 and 2016, right, while Android and iOS were taking off, like the ability to attract good talent there there weren't enough people, mm-hmm. right? And so those salaries just ratcheted up at insane rates. You're seeing the exact same thing in the data science, data engineering world, both of those areas. Literally, people are flipping jobs every couple of years, getting massive pay increases just because there's so much imbalance. So it's a challenge for us as a small company in terms of, we're trying to find those folks in the outside world, but one thing that we are doing is we're actually converting our developers who are also very interested in building new skills. So it's actually funny, our mobile development lead just took a class on data science, and we're actually putting ML tasks through our development organization. And they're, not as good as Levani, but they're learning and they're going to get there at some point in time.
Wonderful.
So, but it's a challenge.
Great. Levani, from your perspective, first thank you for kind of sharing your story and success story about getting the job. That's wonderful to hear. From your perspective, coming from your background, PhD in biophysics, again, we've been kind of talking about the fact that there is a big diversity in people getting into analytics. Any thoughts on kind of, from your perspective, what excited you about analytics? How did kind of Wharton Customer Analytics help you in kind of thinking about that analytics might be the place that you want to get into?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky with my team. I would start with that because when we got together, it was interesting that absolutely neither of us had ever done datathon competition before. There was 5 of us, and I was hoping that there would be someone I would learn from them, and I realized, any of us ever done it. But then, the biggest challenge usually is who wants to do what. And it just so happened, again, just pure luck, that every person on the team knew what they wanted, and everyone wanted to do something different. There was a person on the team who had experience with databases, and he wanted to put the data on the database to make it easier to work with it. There was another person who wanted to do organizational stuff and presentational. Then I had the biggest experience in machine learning from my previous, some Kaggle competitions and some other things I've done. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do that part. And it just divided very well. But it was a very good experience because even though we were doing different tasks, the primary questions we came up with, for first several days of the competition, we didn't really write any machine learning or something like that. First, we wanted to understand the data, but then just throw out the thoughts. Who wants, what can we do? And would this work? Would this kind of feature be helpful with this? And to me, that was such an amazing experience. And as you said, coming from biophysics, I've never done anything like this. It has nothing to do with science, nothing to do with biology, but just simply by having this ability, I think, thinking logically and coming together with other people who are interested in the problem. And some people who had statistics background, like Rachel on the team, she's a PhD in physics and works on the particle accelerator. Exactly. So I think that was the best thing about this competition, and also just having the right people and good question. That's all you need.
Wonderful. Again, Eric and I were recently kind of following up on that recently at a retailer and their analytics team. What was very interesting was just like Levani, there were people who had a PhD in neuroscience. There was a person who had a PhD in organic chemistry. And so I think what we're constantly seeing now is that many, many different skill sets are converging into analytics. So I hope you can see how Wharton Customer Analytics is getting all these people in. Thank you. So one question that came up, Victor, particularly for you, in some of these questions that people are putting in, can you share more detail about what Evite is doing in terms of taking action with the results here?
Yes, we have a couple of things. We have an actual present out from Levani and the team. So they're going to present out to my head of product, our CTO, our head of development. So one, kind of absorb it. And then, yeah, we're going to have a discussion to understand, hey, can we take some of this stuff? Can we operationalize it? Can we do handoff? So, but the goal is, and not actually just for the winner.
Yep.
It's actually also for 4 or 5 of the other competitors. Take that and see, hey, what of this can we operationalize?
Yeah, and just to make sure everybody's on the same page, as we were mentioning before, this is a very big datathon where lots and lots of different teams kind of put in their bids in terms of how to address different problems. It was a very broad, open-ended. So some team, for example, went after segmentation. Some team, for example, went after thinking about how to convert kind of hosts to guests. So lots of different opportunities. And what was amazing to see is, again, from the same data context, how people carved off different subsets of questions that they wanted to address and kind of take ownership of. Okay? Another kind of Levani, for example, question for you. Levani, how was your team formed? Any lessons that you learned about being successful in analytics, diversity, fields of interest, and so on?
Again, I think you hear the word luck a lot during this conference today. I think Charles mentioned it so many times, and I have to really say the same thing. I only knew one person on my team, which was Rachel, who had a PhD in physics, before actually starting this team. We had a Slack channel. There's a Penn Data Science group at Penn, and just someone posted there, hey, I want to participate. Is someone interested? And I was like, why not? But again, I knew only one person. I really lucked out that the other people in the team were also smart and motivated, and it was lots of work, I have to say, because we all were like full-time jobs or full-time students, and we had to really put effort into that. So if you know someone who's passionate, of course, it's easier if you already have same interest, but at the same time, if you don't, then it's really about luck. So.
Great, thank you. I'm looking at the timer. It is telling us that we should be done, so we should. But again, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.